Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for signing in early. If you're joining us for the first time, a big welcome to you. You'll be glad to know that today's session is recorded live and the videos are made available on HeadHunt's Facebook page. So please visit our Facebook page and feel free to like and share with your family and friends. With that being said, we'll start. Good afternoon and welcome to What I Need series for executives, brought to you by HeadHunt and Workforce Singapore. My name's Tammy. Broadcasting live here in LLI, we have with us organizational psychologist, Mr. Adrian Chan, who will be sharing with us on the topic of building resilient leaders at the workplace. Thereafter, Raphael will be sharing with us on WSG programs made available for Singaporeans. Before I hand over the time to our speaker, please note that there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, so please feel free to type in your questions at any time during the presentation. We'll also be conducting our feedback poll right at the end, so please stay with us. With that being said, I'll now hand over the time to Mr. Chan. Mr. Chan, over to you, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Tammy. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and I hope you had a good lunch already. If not, please feel free to grab and eat while you are listening to this talk by me. If nothing else, you will have a good lunch at the end of this talk. So my name is Adrian. I'm an organizational psychologist. Sorry for that. I'm still trying to find my tongue. I would much rather be hiding behind statistical programs, crunching numbers, than talking to people. So this is a bit of a stretch for me. So I'm trying to be resilient and exercise resilience here for myself. In my career as an organizational psychologist, I last retired in the military as a military psychologist. I was a leadership development guy. I did a lot of leadership selection stuff. For those of you who went through NS, you probably would have encountered some stuff designed by my team. It's called the situational test. During those times, we looked at trainees with a lot of resilience in mind. So I've also looked at stuff such as selection for executives after I retired. I did my PhD in leadership. What else? I guess the other thing I'd like to introduce that may be relevant to the topic here is that I'm a parent. I'm a parent of teenagers. I'm 25 years married, and that has been an interesting journey, I would say. Being a parent has made me definitely more resilient as a human being. I moved from not confident of being married to now quite a proponent of being a parent, being a productive parent. The 25 years of marriage and milestone was a big journey for us, me and my wife, and it's something that I love to celebrate. But I'll talk more about that. I would like to now turn over the slides and start talking about the topic. So we're talking about building resilience at the workplace today. We'll cover some stuff about resilience and how we can develop resilience. The scope, we'll talk about what it is, why is it important to leaders, and what are some characteristics of resilient leaders that you'll find. Identify barriers to resilience and what are those barriers that we need to address first before we can actually build resilience in leaders and in the workplace. And finally, we'll have some closing remarks and Q&A, but if at any point in time that you have some questions for me, please feel free to just type them in the chat and I'll either attend to them straight away or I'll leave them to the end if I feel that your questions will be covered by the slides. Okay, so let's just begin. What is resilience and why is it important to leaders in the workplace? Maybe I'll stop talking for now and I would like to invite you to type something, your thoughts about what resilience is into the chat. And I'll pick up from what you have typed and I'll build upon your definition. Give you a couple of moments to think about what is resilience from your perspective. Thank you. I can see some comments already coming in. Bouncing back, not giving up, handling adversity. Those are great thoughts. In fact, you are on the right track. A lot of common descriptions about resilience are like things like not giving up, which is about long suffering, persevering under stress, and the bouncing back component. And generally speaking, it is about what you display when you are in a predicament. And by predicament, it can be a very personal thing. A predicament can range from a small inconvenience, like somebody bumping you in the queue, to a daily hassle, like trying to get your kids ready for school, to work and life transitions, or even relationship transitions. Maybe you've started to date, or maybe you've gotten out of a relationship, or you've suddenly gotten married. These are transitions that can be a predicament in some sense, you know. And it can range all the way to stuff like a long-term suffering. Maybe you're suffering from illnesses, cancer, to sudden setbacks. Maybe you've just lost your job, lost loved ones, and even to the unimaginable catastrophes, you know. So it's a very, very personal thing. And predicaments are something that happen to people, and it's very personal to them. And when we are in a predicament, that's where resilience comes in. And because predicaments are so personal, it's important not to trivialize them and belittle what somebody's going through just because it doesn't feel like a predicament to you. Anyway, I'll talk more about what resilience is, but let's go to the second important question. Why is it important to leaders and to the workplace? Any thoughts? What is the cost of not having resilience? Anyone? You can type in if you want to. What happens when you don't have resilient people in the workplace or resilient leaders? Well, while you're thinking about that, let me just share some statistics with you. All right. According to a study by CDC, the Center for Disease Control, they're just looking at depression in the workplace. And the cost of depression is 200 million lost workdays each year. And that runs to the tune of $17 to $44 billion cost to employers. So resilience can lead to mental well-being situations such as depression, and we're just only talking about depression. So that's a huge cost to employers. On the other hand, when you focus on resilience, it leads to mental wellness. And what they've also discovered is that every dollar spent on mental wellness leads to $3.27 savings in terms of healthcare cost, and $2.73 in terms of absenteeism cost. So there is a downside to not paying attention to resilience, and there is an upside to paying attention to resilience. So it's an important topic, yet it's not something that we quantify here in Singapore or think a lot about. It's something kind of like either you have it or you don't. So let's unpack that further. So what is resilience? I'm going to talk about it in terms of 3 levels. Resilience generally, but resilience at the individual level, and then at the team level, and finally at the organizational level. So a general definition of resilience is like what you have shared with me: being adaptive, the ability to persevere and even thrive in the face of adversity. Then it's also got that bouncing back component that you've also talked about, you know, the bobbing back, you know. And in this situation, bouncing back is not just bouncing back eventually. Resilient people are able to bounce back quicker than the rest and with less scars remaining to show for it. So resilience can also be something related to this psychological trait called hardiness. Hardiness is something that people are born with. You're either born hardy and can endure much suffering, or you're born less hardy. Hardiness is the ability to commit, control, and to rise to a challenge. But the difference between resilience and hardiness is that unlike hardiness, which is something that you're born with, resilience is something that you can develop through practice and learning. I like to think of hardiness like growing, say, a durian tree. You know, you know you're a durian tree. You know eventually you'll bear fruit, but it takes several years before the fruit shows. And hardiness is something that you got to nurture in order for the fruit to show. But on the other hand, resilience is kind of like developing your muscle, your biceps or your triceps. You spend time in the gym, it will show eventually over the course of a few weeks. So it's something that you can grow. And hardiness, that's the other thing about hardiness, is that the research has shown that very few people are born not hardy. Okay, in fact, the research shows that only about 2% of people are, according to one scale, classified as actually not hardy. The rest of the 98% of people are actually quite hardy. So when you think about this and you think about resilience, the news is actually quite positive. Most people are generally somewhat hardy, and with a bit of training, you can be resilient. All right, so it's definitely something that worth talking about further. Okay, now let's look at what resilient individuals look like. And as I go through this next set of slides, I'd like you to have your pen and paper ready for yourself. As I read out each statement, I'd like you to kind of like think about yourself and rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 meaning that this doesn't quite describe you. 10 meaning that it describes you completely. Okay, so 1 to 10. 10 being it describes you completely. So I'm going to read out 6 statements. So at the end of these 6 statements, I'd like you to do a bit of math and add them up to see what is your score over 60. Okay, ready? So here goes. The first statement is resilient individuals cope well with stress. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how well does this describe you? Ready? Next one. Resilient individuals manage their emotions effectively. So I leave that to you to define what that means by effectively. But if you think you can manage emotions effectively, rate yourself closer to 10. Third statement. Resilient individuals maintain a positive outlook despite difficult circumstances. So again, 1 to 10. Fourth statement. Resilient individuals have a growth mindset. So I got to describe what I mean by a growth mindset. Growth mindsets are people who think that they are able to develop. They're not born fixed with something, but whatever that they have, they can grow further. Okay, this is from the work of Carol Dweck. You might have seen the book Growth Mindset. So if you think that whatever that you're born with can be developed further, please rate yourself more highly on this. Next statement, resilient individuals are open to learning and to feedback. So they seek feedback regularly and they grow from the feedback and adapt themselves accordingly. And finally, resilient leaders are adaptive, meaning to say that they have strong problem-solving skills. Whatever situations that they encounter, they're able to make adjustments to how they have coped. A common mantra is what got me here may not get me to where I need to go next. So they adjust themselves accordingly. Okay, so those are the 6 statements out of 60. Can you add up all your scores and see how you are like? So let's look at a poll. Okay, the results are streaming in. Nice, nice. So I'm seeing statistically, it kind of bears out. Very few people would tend to rate themselves in the low resilience segment. Most people would be in the middle to the high. Good, good. Let's keep the scores for now, and we'll move on to resilient teams. Okay, resilient teams. Let's go back to the slides. Okay, so for resilient teams, I like to think of yourself with the current team that you have. I leave it to you to define what that team would be like, as long as you stick to the same reference team, okay? Now, if you don't work with a team, if you are an individual contributor, let's be creative here. Let's think about, say, your family of origin as a team, right? Your mom and dad or your grandparents and your siblings, if you have any. And you can also classify that as a team, right? If you don't have a team at the workplace at the moment. Okay, let's go for it. All right, the first statement, again, there are 6 statements, so rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, all right? Statement 1, resilient teams back each other up. That means they cover for each other, they look out for each other, and when somebody's not feeling too good, they will cover and try to help the other person along. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being most descriptive. Next, resilient teams have strong communication and collaboration skills. They're able to communicate well and collaborate well with each other. Next, they understand each other well. They kind of can read their mind. They kind of know when a person is not feeling up to scratch without even saying a word. They have members who complement each other's skill sets. Right? They don't look the same, they don't behave the same, but the way they behave in the presence of each other somehow makes for a better team. Statement 5, they are collectively adaptive to changing circumstances. Now, in this case, somebody may initiate, hey, the situation has changed, we might need a different way of doing things. And then the rest of the team members would chime in and say, yeah, we need to change. Let's see how we can change and start those conversations going, right? So they play different roles in being adaptive. And finally, they have the shared sense of purpose, and it's the same in terms of where they're going, why they're doing things, and how committed they are to doing it. Okay, so these are the 6 statements that describe resilient teams. Again, add up your scores and see how you do on a scale of range of 1 to 60, right? Let's take a look at the polls. All right, the results are starting to come in. And thanks for being candid. All right? I'm not going to ask you to kind of like name your team that is not resilient or something like that. You know, it's a good self-diagnosis for you to take away and mull on. I would just want to let you know that statistically, it kind of bears out also. Resilient individuals tend to thrive and influence teams to become resilient. So you see the same pattern of scores between resilient individuals and resilient teams. On the other hand, some of you who may rate yourself lower in terms of individual resilience may find yourself fortunate enough to be part of a resilient team. And that's a great gift to have. You know, nothing beats being able to journey together with each other to cover for each other. And for those of you who are blessed to be resilient individuals as well as being part of resilient teams, this is where we ask ourselves the next question, okay? The next question has got to do with resilient organizations. Okay, let's look at let's close this slide, poll for now, and let's look at resilient organizations. All right, resilient organizations. How do we describe resilient organizations? Resilient organizations, again, on a scale of 1 to 10, all right? Let's look at them. And again, I'll give you 6 statements for you to rate your organization. For this, please rate the organization from your own vantage point, all right? Meaning to say that you try not to rely on hearsay, oh, I hear that my senior leader is like this or like that. You try to rate the organization that you're part of from how you have been experiencing it, how it has been coming across based on your personal interactions with people. Okay, so for some of you, it may very much correlate with your team because maybe your team is all that you relate with. If that's what it is, that's fine, right? But on the other hand, if you had the opportunity to interact with people outside your immediate team, please think more closely regarding those interactions as we go through these questions. All right. If nothing else, think about a general feel about your organization. How does it feel like generally when you go to work? Okay, so these are the 6 statements for you to mull on. The first statement is resilient organizations adapt and thrive in the face of change or adversity. Think of stories, think of situations when there has been a change or adversity, and you've kind of seen firsthand or heard firsthand stories about how they've adapted. The second one, and this is a feeler question, all right? You need to feel regarding this one. They have a culture of innovation and continuous improvement. They're just not satisfied with status quo. They like to keep pushing themselves, pushing the envelope. Thirdly, they have a strong sense of purpose and values, pretty similar to your team. Fourthly, they navigate challenges. The key word here is collectively. They come together, they sense make together, and then they decide together after dialoguing together, right? Next one. Resilient leaders are quick to seize opportunities well. The key word here is quick and well, right? They are able to respond quickly and they respond well. And finally, they have effective crisis management and business continuity plans in place to minimize the impact of disruptions. This one should be, if you've heard of them, if you've been part of them, you should be able to answer them. Okay, let's look at your scores on a total of 1 to 60. How is your organization doing? Let's look at the polls. Right, thank you for that. Thank you for that. It kind of maps what it looks like in the team level. And this is really the reality here. You know? Strong organizations comprise strong teams, which comprise resilient individuals in the right places. Okay, thanks for that. So now you know how to do a little dipstick for yourself and your organization. This is your checklist for resilience at all levels. You can take this home, take this to your team. Not only do this diagnosis for yourself, but have conversations with each other around each of those statements, the ones that you don't feel you're doing well in. And this is where you start to build a dialogue, a narrative for resilience building, which we'll talk about in the next couple of slides. Are we good so far? All right, let's move on. So we've covered a bit about the business impact of low resilience. Just a few more points to talk about. We've talked about mental health. We talked about absenteeism due to illness. We've also talked about productivity. And now I'd like to talk a bit about job satisfaction. In people with lower resilience, typically don't last long enough in order to finally grow into the job and find the satisfaction that they need. You know, the work defines them rather than they grow into the job and help co-create a job. You know, so because they don't stay and last long enough, they become more of a price taker, and as a result, they become less satisfied. They also become more cynical at work because they are price takers. You know, they don't feel like they have a stake in the work, and they don't feel like they can experiment and try things and learn from things. And as a result, there is greater resistance to any kind of a transformation that organizations trying to do. So they are also less inclined as a result to be less entrepreneurial at work, and it does not contribute to organizational growth. And some of them do eventually leave because they find that the organization's not their cup of tea when they could have been the ones helping to make a better cup of tea. Okay, so there's a question here about what does it mean to be a price taker? A price taker is somebody who says, oh, if somebody tells you the cost of working in this workplace is that you are on call 24/7, even during after office hours. A price taker is somebody who just takes that, you know, and say, okay, well, that's the culture. All right, too bad. I'll just conform. But a person with high resilience may actually push back and say, hey, can you explain why we have this policy in place? All right, and why do we have this need to be more responsive even during the after office hours? So it's that kind of a dialogue that leads to greater job satisfaction because they feel like they have a say into how to design the space for work. All right. Whereas people with low resilience, because they dare not feel punctured, or they don't dare not feel like they have failed if they ask questions that may make them feel like they are not good employees or something like that. So as a result, being a price taker leads to lower job satisfaction. I hope that answered that. Okay, now let's talk about the next thing. Although we've talked about resilience on its own, I want to introduce this other concept called the hero fabric. Because in my research, especially when I was doing my dissertation for leadership development, I've discovered that resilience actually belongs to this thing called hero. Resilience is the R in the hero. What is the rest of hero? Okay, the first one is hope. Hope is having the willpower and the way power to achieve positive change. People with hope know where they're going and know how to get there. Right? And resilience is part of the hope fabric as well, in the hero fabric. Next, E. E stands for efficacy. And this is the belief that one has the ability, or psychologists call this the agency, to bring about positive change for themselves and for other people around them. Okay? Of course, resilience, you know, it's about being able to adapt in the face of adversity and bouncing back when we face setbacks. And finally, O is optimism. It is this firm belief that positive change can happen given the current limited resources and the current maybe difficult environment. So when you put HERO together, you can see how the four interact to make us more able to flourish and adapt in the face of adversity. And resilience and hope and efficacy and optimism all feed onto each other. They're kind of like a four-legged stool, all right? If you stand on a stool, sit on a stool, sorry, with only one leg, you need a lot of energy to balance, all right? But if you have four legs, you're on very stable ground. So resilience is part of the hero fabric. I just want to let you know that oftentimes when you're talking about resilient organizations, you can't afford to leave out hope, efficacy, and optimism. All right. Okay, let's move on to the next session. How do resilient leaders look like in real life? For this part, I'm just going to give you a synthesis of what the research says. But on your part, as you're listening, right, I'd like you to think about a leader that you think is resilient, that you've encountered before, preferably someone that you know well and interact often enough. And then as I describe all these attributes, see how well this person lives up to the various attributes, right? So here goes. The first one, no surprise, being adaptable. These leaders who are resilient are adaptable, and they are, one question is, okay, why resilient as a leader? Yeah, definitely. I think he is not only resilient, he's born hardy as a leader, you know, gone through tough times. Okay, let's go back. Resilient leaders are adaptable, all right? They adapt very quickly to situations. They're what we call behaviorally and cognitively flexible, which means to say that they have a wide range of behaviors and thinking patterns that they can choose from because it is part of them. So it's an authentic part of them. It's just that their range is a lot wider so they can choose, all right, and to fit to the situation at hand. Next one, emotional intelligence. The word I like to use here is empathy, right? These leaders not only know how to manage their emotions well and able to empathize with others, but it's where it came from. I like to call these leaders who are known by their scars. They live their scars proudly because they have processed through their scars, and the scars have given them precious insights so that they have these insights to empathize with other people and share with other people. So emotional intelligence is more than just having the savvy to know when to smile and read emotions. It's about those empathy that comes from suffering. All right. Okay, next one, grit. You might have come across the book Grit by Angela Duckworth. It's about persevering and being determined to do so in the face of difficult times. These people are described as courageous. They are brave. They never say die. I would also add the word convicted. They know what they stand for. They know what the situation requires, and they have the way power to stand up to situations and to hold their ground. All right. Next one, vision. Vision feeds to resilience, and resilience grows vision. It's kind of like a two-way street. These people have a clear idea of where they want to go, and they know how to get there. And in the face of setbacks, they push back so that the way continues to become clear. Next, problem solving. They know how to push aside the obstacles that stand in the way, and they know how to work around situations, maybe find a different path. And by the way, vision and problem solving is part of the hope. It's part of the hero fabric, all right, that we've described just now. Next, communication. They are able to communicate stories. They're able to collect stories. They're able to curate stories from their fellow team members and from other people that they work with. And they're able to use those stories to convey the important energy and direction. Next, they're positive. Again, positivity is part of optimism. I won't say more because I've talked about that already. And finally, learning agility. Learning agility is the growth mindset stuff that I was talking about previously. It's also the ability to learn faster than other people. So these people lead by their learning. There's a saying in my line of work, as leaders, if you're not learning, you have stopped leading. So the emphasis on learning is so important that psychologists call learning agility a meta competency. It's kind of like the Lord of the Rings, it's the one ring to rule all rings. When you have learning agility as a meta competency, it causes the rest of the competencies to multiply even faster. Okay, so these are the characteristics of resilient leaders, and these are the characteristics that will help leaders become resilient. Two different things. So how does your resilient leader stack up, right? Maybe those are things that you can tell your resilient leader, hey, I appreciate this about you, and this is something that I've noticed in you. Thank you very much for that. Or it could be a feedback to your resilient leader, hey, I've noticed this thing about you, but I'm hoping that you can show more of these other things. Don't be afraid to share feedback then, because resilient leaders love feedback, all right? All right, so the other thing about this is that everything that I've shared here is trainable without having to wait for a setback to happen, right? That's a beautiful thing about resilient leaders. You can train them to become resilient by focusing on these different aspects. You think of them, going back to the bodybuilding analogy, you think of them like weights, training weights, and each one of them is a different weight that you put on. And if you're able to train each of these things separately, put together, the leader will become resilient even before the setback happens. Okay, so that's the beautiful thing about leadership development. Okay, I'd like to share a bit about one proven way to grow resilient leaders without waiting for setback. And this is something that I'm working on. I mentioned previously I was working on my dissertation in the past. That was about 20 years ago. what I discovered from my dissertation was that when leaders go through training, tough training, it only takes 10 minutes to tweak how they reflect. And in the 10 minutes of tweaking how they reflect, the impact to their hero fabric is tremendous. So in one group of the trainees, I got them to reflect in a way poorly. I got them to think about, oh, this is inconveniencing me. This is making me look back in other people's eyes. This is making me think bad thoughts about myself. So that's one group, and gave them 10 minutes of this kind of thinking pattern. Then in another group, I got them to think or reflect what we call adaptively. All right, we got them to think about how does this relate to other positive aspects of yourself? How can you bring some of these lessons learned to your future work? How can you grow from this experience? All right, so that's the second group. And in the third group, for 10 minutes, I just made them do Sudoku puzzles, all right, just as a control. And when I compared the results after these 10 minutes of training, I found that the reflective group, the group that has been made to think positively about their past 8 weeks of training, they demonstrated more psychological capital, more efficacy, more hope, more resilience, more optimism, more confidence in themselves, and more self-awareness. Right? And imagine if I had gone on further training with them, I would imagine that these trainees would become the upper, better performers in their cohort. But unfortunately, I had to stop the training after 10 minutes, and then I had to retune them back. But that already gave me enough evidence to become convicted that you can grow resilient leaders with very, very little training input upfront. Just 10 minutes of reflection can do a lot of wonders. But anyway, that's topic for another day. In fact, I might be talking about this in another session sometime later. Right? We'll see about that. All right, let's move on. Section 3, barriers to building workplace resilience. Just one slide for this, right? And I'm just going to show you this as it is. There are 3 types of barriers or red flags at the individual, at the team, and at the organizational level. All in all, there are 6 things to look out for, right? At the individual level, the first thing to look out for are individuals in key positions who are themselves not resilient. You cannot have that because they will become bad role models. And because they're in key positions, they will impede resilience building in other people. Second thing, at the team level, when you have teams in key places in your organizations, and these teams are not resilient, again, that's something you need to watch out for. It's like cogs in the wheel. The teams are the key teeth in the cogs. And when the teams are not resilient, the cogs break. And then all the gears don't start to function as well. So you need to have the right teams in the right places, right? And you can do that diagnosis through the various indicators that I've shared with you. And if there is a poor climate for learning in those teams, then those teams need to improve their climate. And finally, at the organizational level, a red flag that we look out for is no regular pause to recharge and to reflect. And there's no process in place to harness the lessons learned. All right. So if you have these 6 red flags, you need to really address them first before we can even move on to build resilience in your workplace. All right. I like to think of the organizational stuff as your bank account, right? If you invest in these, removing these red flags, you will start to build up your bank account that will prevent burnout, productivity hits, disengagement, absenteeism, and all that kind of stuff. So it is worth removing these red flags. So if you've had the opportunity to remove the red flags, you are at least 40% there, right? The remaining 60% is about building and maintaining resilience. So let's talk about that. Building resilience, we talked about hero. I like to add hero, 2 more letters to it, hero word, right? What are they, right? Hope. In hope, you need to ask regularly, where are we heading? How are we getting there, right? So that's hope. Efficacy, you need to help people build the ability to get there. Now, efficacy is a complicated thing because sometimes we can't really solve the problem. But sometimes the problem isn't to solve the problem. The problem is to enable people to move one step closer to the solution. Now, that gives them efficacy. And when you have efficacy in people, eventually they'll be able to solve the problem. Okay, we talked about resilience, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. Optimism, it's about showcasing and embodying your ability, your positive outlook. I like to challenge people to ask themselves 3 questions. What's the worst that can happen? What's the best that can happen? And what is most likely to happen? And if you can describe these 3 things, right, then it makes the final question, how to make it happen, a lot easier, right? And then you can role model optimism that is real, authentic, grounded, right? Now, the E and the R, let's talk about the E and R. E stands for energy. And by energy, it's the overall contribution of the hero fabric. When you have hero, it gives you a certain kind of energy, You become like a boss or a person that people don't have to ask, hey, what's the weather pattern with this person coming to work, all right? They know that you are a stable contributor of positive energy. And they know that they can rely on you to be a stable manager of positive energy, right? You are that curator. So E stands for energy. And finally, the R. The R stands for reflection, right? It's the ability to harness what you have learned, the ability to crystallize what is important, and the ability to impart what other people need to know. Now, I like to say here that in my research, I found that the busier people are, the more they need reflection. Okay? In fact, in my research, I found that the top 1% of the business leaders who are very successful, when I looked at their personal habits, invariably I've discovered that there's always some space set aside for their personal reflection. Now, some of these business leaders, very high end, right? They have their personal jets or they have their personal chauffeurs. So the way they reflect kind of like, I guess, reflects their lifestyle, right? Some of them, they don't bring their laptops to the jets, it's about just thinking, or they go to their personal retreats in their personal villas, whatever it is. But it's okay, we're not so atas, right? It's okay to find our own system for reflecting. I configure or I illustrate reflection as identifying your quiet place. You need to find your own lonely mountain to climb up. You need to find your hidden valleys to walk through. And you need to be comfortable about doing that on your own. People say leadership is such a lonely journey. And I tell you, it's lonely not because people are not for you. It's lonely because of stuff like reflection, which people cannot do for you. Right? So I think that's where the distinction comes in. And people who are not willing to engage in the reflection, they can't really temperature gauge how else people are resilient or not resilient in their teams. And they can't manage how to grow resilience in their own organizations. And with that, I'm going to come to the last section. How do you enhance organizational resilience? This is the difficult part, I feel, because it involves a personal transition from you being a resilient individual to managing resilience with your team, and now to orchestrating resilience in your organization. Now, maybe some of us are not at the C-suite level or at that level that we have the overview of what the organization is. Now, for this section, even if you're not there, I like to think of going back to your family of origin. Think of your family as an organization, right? And think about whether there have been times in your family life where you have not transitioned well from being a resilient individual to being a resilient team player to being able to orchestrate resilience in your family. Okay, so for this set of slides, think of that family background if you don't have a vantage point for your organization. Okay, so what are we talking about in enhancing organizational resilience? Firstly, diagnosis. Diagnose, diagnose, diagnose. Who has mental fragility? Who is near the red line? Who is demonstrating ill health mentally? Who is flourishing? Why is there a difference between the same members in the same team? If you don't know your flock, your thermometer is not in the right place. Diagnosis is key. After you have diagnosed, you must be able to describe. And by describing, it's not just providing the case for mental well-being and organizational resilience and all that. It is the ability to describe what does a resilient individual, team, and organization looks like in this current season in your organization. Are you going through a transition? Are you going through a transformation? Describe in very clear behavioral terms, what does it look like? Again, if you can't describe that, maybe you're not collecting the right stories. Maybe you're not spending time reflecting and engaging with people. Third one, develop. Develop is about kind of like ring fencing the ones who are in critical places, but are not at the right level of resilience. It's also about ring fencing the teams that are not in the right place. Then you have to make tough choices between developing them, or sometimes in very extreme circumstances, you have to curtail their toxic input to other people, right? And those are tough decisions to make. Next, deploy. Deploy your agents of resilience, I would say. These are the sojourners who will be trusted to help you convey what it looks like, what it feels like to be resilient, right? These are the people who also know how to journey with other people, who can help cover for each other. I call them the strategic reserves, right? Every organization must have a strategic reserve team, right? And that strategic reserve sometimes is to be deployed into these places that needs a bit of shoring up until the rest can catch up. And finally, down tools. This is my favorite part, right? This is where you implement organizational processes to pause, to recharge, to reflect, to redirect, to relearn, and basically to just find a different mind space to enjoy the season that your organization is going through. So these are all tough things that needs to be done because your role transitions into kind of like the overseer, the person who has oversight on what's around the next bend. So with that, I've come to the end of my presentation. Maybe I'll just end with one last slide, sharing 4 types of reactions that I've seen in the people that are, in various episodes of my life, okay? The first type of reaction are, hey, why you think so hard? Nobody has died lah. It's not so bad lah, all right? And I've actually encountered people like that, and in the military, right? We call this dark humor, maybe people have failed terribly, in their appointments, and then they somehow are able to laugh about it, right? And it's traumatic, but somehow they're hardy, they're resilient, they process it, and they realize that after weathering through it, it's not that bad, and that becomes a yardstick. Nobody's died, so it's okay. Right? So this one refers to traumatic events that have been processed through, right? Now, the second reaction is a bit not so good, right? It's like, wow, near death already. Somebody is going to die soon. If we don't do something about it, it's going to be too late. Huh? So this kind of situation refers to organizations or people who have are going through death by 1,000 cuts. You know, it's coming already. You can see the line, the cliff is there, and we got to be proactive about it. At least they recognize that. Now, the third kind of reaction are those that I call, wow, somebody has already died, okay? And because of that, let's make sure that it's not in vain, right? It's somebody has encountered a sudden, irrevocable loss, terrible defeat of some kind. And the only thing that we can do after the lament, after the being in the various stages of grief, is to move on from it and to bounce back properly and say, okay, let's make sure that never again. Let's make sure that it's never in vain, right? So these are the three types of reaction which if you are in the various types of situation, you know, a traumatic event, a protracted event, a sudden loss, I hope these are the reactions that you would manifest. If nothing else, please don't manifest the last kind of reaction. The last kind of reaction is this. Huh? What happened? Who died? That's the worst kind of leadership reaction that I hope never to see. Because it's probably a leader who is not acquainted with grief, a leader who is not acquainted with resilience, and a leader who doesn't know how to look out for the signs, a leader who has been demonstrating an imposter syndrome. Instead of wearing their scars, they hide their scars and try to put on a false front. And somehow they begin to believe their own falsehood, believe their own lies. They're not open to feedback. They're not open to the signs. And as a result, when something has happened, it actually passes them by, and somebody actually have to tell them the bad news. So with that, I end my conversation with you. I hope this has been helpful for you. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, please type them and I'll take a look at your questions. Okay, there was one question about flashing the slide before the last one. I don't know whether, is it this one? Okay. Yeah, it's all the letter D's lah. You know, Asians should be A's, right? But unfortunately, I'm a D person for the alliteration. Okay, that's one. Another question was, how do we handle long-serving staff in their comfort zone? Oh my, and are too complacent in their work. They're not keen to take new challenges and accept new and better ways of doing things. Okay, well, sadly, every organization will have that kind of people. I think you're lucky if that's the minority. I think if you have that as the majority, it's time for you to step up to be more resilient, right? Okay, but yeah, in psychology, right, there is two kinds of intelligence. It's very, very old research. There is fluid intelligence, which is the adaptive, learning on the go kind. And then there's the crystallized intelligence. Crystallized intelligence is, another word for it is fossilized intelligence, right? They live on the experiences of the past, and they're unable to adapt the experiences and lessons learned from the past to the new. And these are people who forgot how to learn, right? And these are also people, maybe they have been scarred by past experiences so that they dare not venture forth and be entrepreneurial. They dare not be more exploratory. And so as a result of this, right, it accrues. And maybe before I go on to this potential solution, I want to tell you one more bad news. The one more bad news is this. If nothing changes, all of us as human beings will tend towards crystallized intelligence, meaning to say, we will tend towards relying on our past experiences as shortcuts to solve problems that we are able to pattern recognize. All right. So if we do nothing about it, we all will become those kind of organizational dinosaurs in time to come, right? So what's the solution? One way to address this is to make sure that we are always continually learning. Growth mindset, Carol Dweck's work, right? We talked about the ability to keep clarifying, the ability to keep learning something. And this is both a personal as well as an organizational investment. I haven't talked about near misses. Maybe now is a good time to talk about it. In organizations that learn well, they not only talk about successes, they talk about the mistakes, and they talk about this thing called near misses. A near miss is, actually it still went well, you know, but if I didn't share this one thing about it, you wouldn't know that it could have gone disastrously, right? And that's a near miss. So a near miss is important to talk about. In fact, it is something that you want to talk about even more than the disaster or the success. Because the near miss comprises two things. One is a realization that something bad could happen. Now that realization is worth harvesting. And then the second thing is the adaptation. What did you adjust in order to move forward? Now again, that adaptation is worth harvesting. And that's why these two things makes a near miss more important to talk about. Now, when an organization keeps talking about such near misses, eventually you strengthen that muscle that makes you more agile and actually more resilient when it comes to a setback. And this one slows down the eventual fossilization that will happen. So that's the bad news, you know. If we don't do anything about it, we will eventually become fossilized, right? But if we do something about it, then we can slow down the fossilization. Now, what about those people? You must be thinking, are those people already in my organization? What am I going to do, right? Cannot kick them out, right? So you need to make sure that the people who are relying on that crystallized intelligence are placed in the right jobs. There are actually some jobs that are very useful for them. And these jobs are monitoring types of jobs, enforcement types of job, performance maintenance type of jobs. You know, we call them the high reliability kind of roles. So if they are in accounting, for example, you can have people very experienced and very quick to identify mistakes, to remain in those situations. On the other hand, you can also have people who are in frontline facing human beings. The thing about those things is that these people have accrued a lot of experiences dealing with people, dealing with the good side of people and the bad side of people. So providing that they're not cynical, their crystallized intelligence can actually be put to good use handling people. So that will be another type of situation where you can deploy people like that. Just don't deploy people, those kind of people, into situations that are highly dynamic, highly what we call VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? Don't deploy them in VUCA situations. Don't deploy them in situations that require them to be entrepreneurial and experimental. You are asking for trouble, right? And finally, just because they have settled in their comfort zones doesn't mean that they can be nudged from their comfort zones. They can be nudged from their comfort zones. It just takes a lot more time, a lot more energy, but it can be done, and it should continue to be done for the sake of other people who are a lot less fossilized. So involve them in reading, talk about their reading, talk about their reflective experiences, talk about how they can share their reflections and teach what they have to know to the younger ones. So those are some examples. Okay, what other questions do we have? Jade is talking about how does an individual build resilience in a hire and fire organization. Well, if you're the individual being hired and fired, you will actually build resilience quite quickly for yourself. But for the organization who is in the hire and fire strategy, I don't think it is I don't think they view building resilience as a strategy for business growth, right? They probably somehow convince themselves that it's a lot easier to find and then discard, find, use, and discard. And there are organizations like that. And unfortunately, sometimes the workplace can be such a high tempo, highly demanding situation that these organizations somehow convince themselves that it's not worth investing in building resilience. In those kind of situations, I would say that try to find fellow sojourners, give yourself a deadline for how much you want to endure, how much you want to build, how much you want to learn before you venture too close to your own red lines, your own fault lines, and make sure that you identify that. For the organization, I would say that even though maybe the industry that they are in could be that kind of fast-paced situation, I would say that there are always some parts of the organization that requires them to be slower, more considerate, and those aspects of the organization can benefit from a different strategy. This is where you can talk about resilience. This is where you can talk about self-care, talk about how to minimize the toxic culture and all that kind of stuff. And I would also say that the leadership in that place needs to know what is the weightage. There are some frontliners that maybe they self-select to be in that kind of a be hired and then be fired role as long as they earn enough money. But then there are also some parts of the organization that will benefit from, hey, we belong to a family. Hey, we are here to have a meaningful life at work. And hey, we are actually able to care for each other. So it is really the leadership role to do that diagnosis properly, right? And I can't say that what that role would, what is that proportion? They have to do their own research for that. Okay, my time is almost up. Is there another question? Any notable similarities or differences in the challenges faced by organizations in Singapore versus those in other parts of the world when it comes to building resilience? Yeah, so I worked in Bhutan 6 years. I helped them set up their equivalent of a civil service college. I think human beings will be human beings. The human response to hardships and adversity is quite universal. There's no deviation, I would say. I think when it comes to organizations, though, there can be differences, and these differences can be due to maybe savvy. Some organizations in first world countries are a lot more exposed to the resources out there. Like for example, this seminar is available to Singapore. It's a great credit to Singapore what it's trying to do, but these resources may not be available to third world countries, for example. I don't know. So there is that difference that leads to how teams and how organizations create their own narratives around hardship. But regardless, the solution doesn't change. The solution for building organizational resilience always starts from the individual, then goes to the team, and then finally back to the organizational level construct. So I would also say that in some parts of the world, religiosity and spirituality may be more. And in some of those cultures, people who are more religious and spiritual by culture, their attribution and their buffering for hardships is actually a lot stronger. And Whereas in pragmatic Singapore, maybe pragmatism is our religion, I don't know, right? But in pragmatic Singapore, our take towards hardship is just, towards building resilience is more of a cost benefit analysis. So I think those are some of the differences I can say. Okay. Right, I don't think we have time for any more questions, so I'll hand over to Tammy now. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chan, for this interesting delivery and we have learned so much and gotten many practical and useful tips that can be applied on various settings. So thank you very much, Mr. Chan. Right now, we'd like to invite Raphael to give an overview on WSG programs that are available for Singaporeans. Over to you, Raphael.
Thank you, Tammy, and thank you, Adrian, for the very wonderful sharing on resilience. And I do think that resilience is very important. And so today I'm here to share with you what WSG has to help you build resilience in your job search and career journey. So I have 7 programs and services that I'd like to share, which are employment support, so that you can become more adaptable and more employable moving forward. So a quick overview on what Workforce Singapore is all about. We are a statutory board under the Ministry of Manpower. We help individuals meet your career aspirations and help you secure quality jobs. And so how can you do that? So it's through the wide range of programs and services that we have for you to support you in this journey moving forward together. So the first program I'd like to share is our career conversion programs. Some of you may be familiar with this. It is a program designed to help mid-career individuals rescale to take on new jobs in growing sectors with good career opportunities. You get to receive industry-recognized training through structured training programs, and that will allow you to move into better occupations or sectors that you are interested in with good career prospects. Now, there are 2 schemes under this program. The first is the place and train, which you will first be hired before you undergo training. And the second scheme is actually the attach and train, whereby you undergo training first before you are given the job placement. Now, you receive salary support of up to 90% when you are under the career conversion program, and you can and we have a lot of CCPs under us with over close to 100 of them across 30 different sectors. Now, if you are keen to find out more about the career conversion programs that we have to offer and what are the sectors and what are the different programs, you can actually scan the QR code on the right-hand side of the slide that will bring you to our website with more information. Similarly, with the programs and services that I'll be sharing later on, if you have any questions or you would like to find out more, you can also scan the QR code on the respective slide to get the information on our website. Now, moving on will be the SG United Mid-Career Pathways Program, which is a full-time attachment program for mid-career individuals aged 40 and above. So it will allow you to also gain meaningful experience so that you widen your network and you can get more skills so that you become more employable, more adaptable, and resilient as well. Now, under this program, you receive up to $3,800 per month in training allowance, which is co-funded by WSG and the employer. And if your performance is satisfactory, there is a possibility of conversion to full-time employment as well. Now, if you would like to find out more on what are the SGUP job openings, we actually have the My Careers Future Job Portal that will allow you to filter and find jobs on that, which I will share in a moment's time. Now, the next program will be the career trial. So the career trial is designed for those who have taken a break or have decided to come back after a short break, and they would like to test the suitability of a certain job. Now, this will allow you to do so before you fully commit to the role. and this will also give the employer a sensing of your suitability as well. So when you take on the career trial, there's a training allowance of $7.50 to $15 an hour for full-time positions up to 480 hours a month, and for part-time positions up to 80 hours per month. Now, this is only for locals who are unemployed and actively seeking employment before the commencement of career trial. Do note that you are also not allowed to undergo any other form of employment when you are undergoing the career trial as well. So just now I have mentioned 3 programs, which is the CCP, the SGUP, and the career trial. And I've mentioned that you can actually look for jobs under the SGUP and career trial on My Careers Future. So what is My Careers Future? My Careers Future is a one-stop free job portal for you to access a wide pool of ready jobs, and it will be based on your skill sets that you input into the portal. Now, it has the ability to help you recommend some jobs that you are suited for based on the skills selection that you have input as well. So you will be able to look for jobs, help you to plan for your career transition, and so forth. Now, if you like to access MCF, you can actually scan the QR code on the right. Now, next up, My Careers Future is the online portion of things for WSG. We also have an offline portion whereby you can speak to a dedicated career guidance team offline. So you can walk into our Careers Connect Center, E2I centers, or you can also connect with us over video text or SMS. Alternatively, you can also call our hotline 6883-5885 for more info. We also have 24 SG United Jobs and Skills Centers across the island, which you can walk in to help you receive career guidance and matching services. So it will help you to receive personalized guidance one-on-one, and you will get tips on how to overcome job search challenges. You get opportunities to attend workshops on interview writing skills, how to beef up your CV, how to make your resume better, and so on. So all this is to help you stand out from the competition during your job search. Next up, we also have another program called the Volunteer Career Advisors Initiative, or the VCAI. So this program is for those who rather speak to an industry professional instead of a career coach. So we have peer support for you. So you can speak to an industry professional so that they will give you their insights and their experience based on the many years that they've been working in the industry, and they will share with you all this information so that you can make an informed career decision whether if this industry or this sector is something that you like to move into. So we have launched this initiative for many sectors like electronics, healthcare, ICT, logistics, sustainability, and more. So if you like to find out what are the sectors that you can speak to an industry professional on, you can actually also scan the QR code on the right side of the slide. Lastly, the last program that I'd like to share with you is our SG United Jobs and Skills Placement Partners Initiative. This provides local job seekers with additional job search channels, which will be done through private employment agencies matching services. Now you get to tap on their extensive network and their expertise to help you secure job placement and work attachments. Now this program is only for locals who are either age 40 and above, unemployed for 6 months or more, or persons with disabilities. So I've come to the end of my sharing session. I'll leave you with our QR codes that will lead to a couple of things. The first is our mailing list, where it will be a newsletter for you. The second will be our Telegram channel, which also has updates on all our events and job openings as well. And the last one will be our corporate website for more info. So with that, I end my presentation and I'll leave the time back to Tammy.
Thank you, Raphael. Thank you very much. Now, speaking of resilience, our team here at HeadHunt would like to think of ourselves as a resilient team. So we'd like to invite you to participate in our feedback poll. So please take a few moments to share with us your observations. The poll should be popping up on your screen anytime. So please take a few moments to share. Thanks. Okay, thank you very much for your feedback and for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed this Brown Bag series, which is brought to you by HeadHunt in partnership with Workforce Singapore. Our next session will be on next Wednesday, the 17th of May, and the topic will be Securing Our Future by ATOS Holdings. So we hope to see you there. Please register early on our website, masterclass.sg. With that, we'd like to wish you a wonderful day ahead. See you next week.